Samsung is continuing to destroy records left and right with the new Galaxy S25 series. First up in today's trio of news stories, the Galaxy S25 series is continuing to crush sales this year. So far, it has sold a little more than 2 million units more than the Galaxy S24 series did in the same time period last year. And apparently all models are seeing a pretty nice boost. The Galaxy S25 series has now sold a little over 20 million units since its release in January. And apparently part of the success comes from the Galaxy S25 Edge. That's that ultra-thin smartphone that Samsung showed off at Unpacked in January, but it didn't actually launch until around the end of May. The Galaxy S25 Edge is apparently responsible for about 650,000 units of that 20 million, which obviously that's a very small drop in the bucket, but it is part of that 2 million more units that the Galaxy S25 series has sold over the Galaxy S24. Next up, let's talk about Apple and those tariffs. Yesterday, Apple CEO Tim Cook visited the White House, and it was part of a press conference that the president had where Apple was announcing about $100 billion in investments in the US with Corning. Apple and Corning are announcing that the Gorilla Glass that will be found on the iPhone and Apple Watches will all be manufactured here in the US, specifically in Kentucky. Now, it's still a long way from having a fully made in the US smartphone or iPhone, but it does help Apple lower their tariff bill. Now, speaking of that made in the US iPhone, it seems that the president has come to terms that that is never going to happen. Cook has already been pretty adamant that companies don't manufacture in China solely due to that cheap labor. In fact, the labor isn't even that cheap anymore. But all of the skills that are needed to do this manufacturing at the scale that companies like Apple need, they're based in China and in Southeast Asia. Not to mention, a lot of the parts also come from different countries of Southeast Asia. Obviously, Apple works with Samsung a lot for a lot of their components, and their chips are made by TSMC, so that's South Korea and Taiwan, where they're getting other partners. And instead of shipping them all the way to the US to manufacture, just sending them to China is a lot faster. Now, Cook did not come to Washington empty-handed. As we know, the president likes to be wild and have stuff given to him. So the Apple CEO did give the president a 24-karat golden glass. The glass comes from Corning, and it was engraved for the president, with the design being done by a U.S. Marine corporal and the base coming from Utah. Essentially, it's an award that was fully made in the US. Finally, let's talk about the Google Pixel 6a. There's been a lot of reports coming up in the last few weeks and months that the Pixel 6a continues to catch on fire. As usual, this is coming from the battery, and Google did push out a mandatory update for the battery to help combat this. And now Google has opted to stop selling the Pixel 6a altogether. Now, this was made available in 2021, so when the Pixel 7a launched in 2022, obviously Google stopped selling new models of the Pixel 6a, but they were still selling refurbished units of the Pixel 6a on the Google Store. However, that's no longer happening, which isn't a big deal because the Pixel 6a has about 1 more year of software and security updates before it gets abandoned anyways. Now, all the news that we talked about today will be in the description down below. And if you like this video, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.